The White House has passed a temporary funding bill that will run through early December. The bill will affect current acquisition projects underway and those planning to get started this new fiscal year. Larry Allen is president of Allen Federal Business Partners. He's former president of the Coalition for Government Procurement. Larry, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
The government didn't shut down, which is a good thing, but we do have a continuing resolution. What kind of impact does that have on federal contractors?
Mimi, by now, experienced federal contractors should be familiar with starting each new fiscal year under a continuing resolution. This is kind of our annual tradition now. The real question is, how long will it go? The current CR goes through December 3rd. There probably will be some smaller ones if we feel like Congress can make progress on getting an entire appropriations package done by Christmas. That's really what I would hope for in looking at all of this. You don't know if that'll happen this year, but that would be the best possible outcome. In the meantime, if you're a contractor, you know that there are no new starts that are paid for with appropriated funds. You get to work on the projects that you got to work on last year, as long as there's funding for that. In most cases there is. But if you want that new funding, then you've got to get a little creative. You have to ask your customers if they have access to capital accounts that might have the scope to do the type of work you want to do, or if there's some sort of no-year money, like the Technology Modernization Fund for IT projects. Those are things that would still allow new projects to get at least underway while Congress catches up and passes a full year FY22 appropriation.
Well, as you said, for experienced contractors, this has become the new normal. Everybody knows that this is now going to happen. So they're prepared and they've adjusted to it. What about small businesses? What about contractors that aren't as experienced?
I think that's a real challenge for them, Mimi. Starting a new year, smaller businesses tend to be more cash flow dependent. And right now, if you don't have new projects that you can bring in the door and start to work on, that can really hurt your cash flow, which in turn hurts your employees. So you've got to have something else going on. You've got to have some other type of work, whether it's state and local government work or private sector work. Something that you can rely on to keep your business going, or hopefully you had a really good end of FY21. I've been talking to clients of mine who had a good end of FY21, and they said a lot of their items aren't going to be able to ship until December. So for them, the key is, how much can they bill on stuff they've already bought in the door between now and then? But that's a better problem to have, because you've got work at the end of FY21. You can start to work on that now. The funds have been obligated. You can get paid. So if you're a small business and had a good end of year, you'll probably be okay. If you're brand new coming into this marketplace at the start of FY22, I got news. You're going to have a whole lot of meetings, a whole lot of discussions, setting the table for business that you might get in Q2 or Q3.
Well, you talked about maybe some workarounds like the Technology Modernization Fund. That can be used for IT projects. What else? What if you can't use that? What else can you do?
Well, certain agencies have capital funds, Mimi. They have different ways that they can use them. They're not all open for different types of projects. Sometimes they're very specific for things like non-commercial item development. You could also have some funds that have no-year money. That's limited, but one area where you see those is in defense commissary. And while that's small, there are people who work in that industry, and they continue on just as they did last week, because they've got self-generating funds that they don't have to worry about Congress passing. So those are just some examples, but really getting final FY22 appropriations passed quickly is a big deal for getting a good start off to FY22. You've got these little stopgaps, but they're very isolated, very specially purposed. They may help at a tactical sense, but they're not going to replace the strategy.
Larry, let me ask you about the debt ceiling, because we're going to be hitting that relatively soon. Does that affect contractors? How does that impact them?
I think it has a big potential impact, Mimi, on contractors. The number one impact is that if we go into a default, the Treasury is going to have to decide who gets paid. So if you're a contractor, and even if you have an invoice in before an agency, you might not get paid on that invoice if we have a default in the debt ceiling. That gets back to the cash flow issue for small businesses we just talked about. But it also goes further than that. You're working with federal people in agencies either on current projects or on prospective projects. Those federal people may not get paid either. And if they're not getting paid, they're probably going to be furloughed. You know, we saw that happen earlier this week with the Transportation Department, furloughed several thousand employees because the transportation fund didn't have enough money in it. That kind of brings government business to a halt when that happens, but it's even more than that. Merely the prospect of that happening sometimes is enough to slow things down as people get caught up pondering the what-if scenarios.
All right, well, Larry, we're going to watch this and see what happens.
That's all we can do.
Thank you so much for being on the program.